Hi there. I got going on this video and then forgot that I wanted to share something with you. This is not a sponsored video, but I've discovered something recently from Trader Joe's that probably many of you already know about. Is something that I bought a year ago, because this is, I don't know if this is seasonal, but it's the Trader Joe's spiced chai tea bags. A rich, robust blend of Assam black tea and exotic spices. And in here is black tea, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, cardamom, star anise, black pepper, nutmeg, roasted chicory, and vanilla bean. So you add your own, after you make a regular cup of tea, you add your own milk, like a chai tea. I think chai means tea, but I'll just call it a chai tea latte. And you let the tea get as strong as you want. I then heat up the milk I'm going to add in the microwave, because I use almond milk, just a little bit of milk. And then I add a tiny bit of sweetener, like blue agave or Vermont maple syrup, in a little glass bottle that is also from Trader Joe's, and it lasts a lifetime because I don't use it that often. So I highly recommend this. You do need to let the tea steep, a good amount of time, which I don't normally do for other tea. I'm a very quick tea steeper, but for this I do let it steep for a couple, like 2 minutes instead of 1. Really good though. Really enjoying it. Okay, I'll try not to spill it while I'm sitting on Suki's ottoman. Suki is right over here, a little bit miffed that I'm sitting on her ottoman. I'll be done in no time at all, Suk. I wanted to talk about a couple books that I finished, and I also wanted to talk about the reading slump that I find myself in, and how I almost always forget when I'm hit with a reading slump, because it only happens once or twice a year for me, what it is I should do, because I don't recognize it when I'm in it, and then I perpetuate it by doing the opposite of what could get me out of it. I'll explain. So I'm just going to start by sharing the fact that I did finish Mrs. Dalloway, and it has now usurped To the Lighthouse for me. This was a reread. I read it in the fall of 2022. I called it, like, I don't do star ratings or anything, but I do keep a Word document of books that I've read. I've done that for like the last 5 years. And I just write, just based on my reading experience, I just write good, didn't like, I don't say didn't like, good, not good. This is all just meaning my experience, not the actual way the book is written. What else? Excellent. So good, very good, excellent, or fair. I don't know what I write if I didn't like it. But I was part of a read-along, a Bookstagram read-along, and we read A Voyage Out, which is the book before Mrs. Dalloway. Then we read Mrs. Dalloway, and then I think I stopped the read-along. And so I read this again, and boy, is it a different book the second time around, because for me, I would have said, oh, it's so cool. And somebody in my last video, just so brilliantly talked about the artifice that Virginia Woolf is using. It's a certain type of writing that she so wonderfully explained, which if she doesn't mind, I will put down below what she explained. I'll just paraphrase from her comment. But she talked about the type of writing that this but the commenter talked about the type of writing that she's using, and some other writers, maybe even it was D.H. Lawrence, used it, where you're zooming in to certain characters in a scene like outside in the streets of London, and then you're zooming back to the perspective of the protagonist, and that's certainly what Virginia Woolf is doing here. What I missed the first time, because I was so caught up in that, is I missed the delving into the characters that she does. She does a lot more delving into some of her colleagues or her friends than she does Mrs. Dalloway. And so that was just really rich, a rich experience. And who is the man that she was supposed to marry? I think it's Peter. Yeah. Peter comes to town and he drops by Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa's house. He doesn't know that she's having a party that night. He gets invited and he puts up a front, but then he ends up breaking down in tears over something in her living room, and he doesn't expect that he was going to do that. And she marries Richard, but this whole idea of having a memory about what my life would have been if I would have married Peter. And am I actually still slightly in love with him, even though my life is fine with Richard and his daughter that we love so much, and we're glad that she is who she is. But what would it have been like? And here she is seeing Peter again now. They're both in their 50s, and what that's really like in life, a path not taken. And they're really thinking about this because of the scene in the living room. And then there's a couple other characters that are looked at more closely. The reader gets to see the Septimus, the veteran, who unfortunately has, I think, what they called shell shock back then after the First World War, but has PTSD and is just suffering so much. And we get to see a closer look at him and what he's going through and what his wife is going through. This was so excellent. On the back of this particular edition, Margaret Drabble is blurbed. Virginia Woolf is one of the few writers who changed life for all of us. Her combination of intellectual courage and painful emotional sensitivity created a new way of perceiving and living in the world. So I do want to go on to read Orlando. I think also there is a lovely viewer who commented that she would like to read Orlando too. So whoever you are, if you're watching this, remind me, because I will eventually read Orlando. I don't know if I can do a read along. I'm not too good at them, but we'll see. I don't know, maybe by the end of the year I'll get to Orlando, but what I really want to do is go back to A Voyage Out. Is that what it's called? The book before this. The reason I want to do that is that in my comment after I read it on that Word document list that I keep, I wrote about A Voyage Out, excellent. And about Mrs. Dalloway, I put very good. So now I have to go back and read A Voyage Out. I did finish Lady Chatterley's Lover. And I will say the book continued to just be breaking all the rules. I had no idea how, for its time, graphic it got. I don't feel like it was egregious in terms of I don't know. I feel like all of the sex that's in the book was in keeping with the characters that D.H. Lawrence had established. But I felt like it was a little too long, the way books are. But he was clearly writing the book he really, really wanted to read, because he was already banished from England and was just determined to write the books that were in him that really needed to be written, according to him. And yeah, I just felt like maybe it was 100 pages too long. and it stretched out a little bit. But, you know, that's just me. But I'm so glad that I read it. It's now, I mean, I definitely will go back to Sons and Lovers that I tried to read earlier this year with a different perspective. So someday I'll go back to that. So after Mrs. Dalloway, this is what happens. After I finished The Magic Mountain, after I finished War and Peace, I get reading slumps because I just want to be in that book that has finished, that I've enjoyed so much. And I don't really recognize the reading slump. What happens is I start to get, often, I will get holds from the library that I've been excited about, that I must have been excited about because I put the hold on the book. But by the time I get them, if I'm in that reading hangover, then I start not liking anything that's coming to me. So that's really what's, so the books that have come to me that I otherwise would really like. One is the Useum, a health resort horror story by Olga Tokarczuk. She is the author of Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, which I loved. I really do want to get to her book Flights. And I started reading this. I have to tell you, I so highly recommend this book. It just isn't for me right now, but it is so in keeping with the atmosphere of The Magic Mountain, except you know from the beginning something is going awry. It's almost like a second person narrative, which also makes it so delightful. I love it. It's like this person is with you and telling you a story, but he knows, but he's kind of, yeah, I guess it's second person. Let me give you an example. So there is a Polish man, a young Pole suffering from tuberculosis. He arrives at Wilhelm Opitz's guest house for gentlemen in the village of Gorbensdorf, a health resort in the Silesian mountains. This is September 1913. And he has arrived, and just to give you an idea of the style of writing, Wahonets, I'm going to pronounce it Wahonets because there's the J in there, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's just getting in, he's sick, he's not feeling well, he's had a long train journey. They bring him into this place, he's not feeling well at all. They kind of have to guide him into the house. They give him some broth. The broth floods Wahonets's body with warmth, and the poor boy is unaware of the moment when he falls asleep. We shall keep him company a while longer. Listen to his calm breathing. We are pleased that his lungs have settled down. Now our attention turns to a streak of light as thin as a blade that falls into the room from the corridor and stops on the porcelain chamber pot underneath the bed. We are drawn to the cracks between the floorboards, and there we disappear. Are we accompanying a ghost? It's not really like that. It's not as explicit as that, but I love it that we are in the room observing what's going on. And this comes up again. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, man, do I want to read this? I started reading it, and then I thought, I don't know if I can keep reading it. But now that I've read that, I've reminded myself of how much I've enjoyed this, and I think I'm going to keep it out from the library and try again. I was reading this in the morning, which was working out really well. Already, I was about, I don't know, 30 some pages in, and already things are getting very different than The Magic Mountain, but I don't know. I will see. And then the other one I got out that I think this is an interesting book to try, but just not for me right now, is Vivian by Emily Russo. I think this is her first novel. She's a writer and astrologer, and she writes poetry. Did Vivian Volker kill Wilma Lang? This question has dogged Vivian ever since Wilma jumped from a window to her death, shortly after Vivian Volker stole her lover. So we are, this book is set in a house that is shared by Vivian and her daughter, whose name I think also begins with V. So it gets a little confusing. Or maybe her granddaughter's name begins with a V. Anyway, it gets confusing. I liked the voice. Vivian is an artist, and she's been, her retrospective work is going to be shown somewhere that's very prestigious, and she finds out about this, and she's asked about it, and she's very pleased. But then through social media, there's like a campaign that starts to say, like, she killed somebody. I mean, she drove Wilma Lang to end her life. And so then the exhibit gets pulled. But yeah, I think it's an interesting book, and I hope someone's reading it. And I think I found out about this book because somebody was reading it, but I don't remember. So if you're watching this video and you have read this, please let me know. But yeah, it just wasn't the right book for me right now. So I'm going to return that. And then my beloved Dorothy project came out with, or published, Overstaying by Ariane Koch, translated by Damien Searles. I think this is a German writer, winner of the Aspect Prize, the most prestigious German prize for debut fiction. Swiss playwright and visual artist Ariane Koch's Overstaying is an absurdist tour de force. That's where it got me. I love the cover, but it is absurdist writing, and it just wasn't for me right now. It was about a stranger. Oh yeah, contemporary Bartleby living alone. Check it out. I'm sure it's very interesting as a quirky kind of book. It just wasn't for me at the time. So then I remembered the thing that helps me is not new releases and debut novels, but it's really an author that is something I can dip into and that isn't very much trouble and that I know I'll probably like. And then I get a win. It's not a win. I get momentum. And so that's usually Anita Brookner for me. I'm about to go on a trip, a weekend trip, in a couple days. And so when I go to the library before I leave, I'm going to search for an Anita Brookner that I haven't read. I could turn to this beast of a book, Anthony Trollope, which is a book, Phineas Finn, that is part of the Palliser series. But this is so politically based and so dry, this particular book in the series, that I've been in this place for a long time, and this is probably not the book for me to pick up. But I should just keep on going and get to the part that develops into the actual characters, other than Phineas Finn and his political challenges. So, and there was one other thing that that helped me. So I was watching James's podcast, a Booktube video, and now I'm forgetting the name of his channel, and I don't want to guess, so I'll put it right here. He was talking about, maybe he was talking about Booktuber, which is a celebration of Victorian writing in October. It got me thinking about Wilkie Collins again and The Woman in White, which I will start at some point, or try to start. He was talking about November being what is the theme in November? And why was he talking about, I'll put the theme here because now I'm blanking now that I'm trying to think of it. But he had a reading list and it included some Chekhov plays. And it reminded me of this book that I have just bedside, and I read it every once in a while. And as a matter of fact, I dip into it whenever I'm in a reading slump. And it's George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, in which 4 Russians give a masterclass on writing, reading, and life. It's actually George Saunders that gives the masterclass, but that's very generous of George. It says, for 20 years, George Saunders has been teaching a class on the Russian short story to his MFA students at Syracuse University. In A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, he shares a version of that class, offering some of what he and his students have discovered together over the years. Paired with iconic short stories by Chekhov, Turgenev, Tolstoy, and Gogol, the 7 essays in this book are intended for anyone interested in how fiction works. It's so readable. You really do feel like you're in his class, because I just started another section, but I had just finished reading a Chekhov short story. This one is called The Darling, for those of you that would know that story. And in the story, he has different numbers, 2, 3, and after the story, he's going to talk about the type of story it is and break it down a little bit for you. And you get to see the way that these authors in this time are writing. It's so fascinating. He goes into the fact that The Darling is a pattern story. And then it really opened my eyes, like, oh yeah, that's so cool. It is a pattern story. And he specifically talks about, I learned about the Freytag's triangle: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. This all may seem dry, but George Saunders is anything but that. He's so engaging. And I happened to see, so as soon as I watched James's video on this November themed reading month, which I'm, as I said, forgetting the theme, they're going to be reading some Chekhov and other, I don't know, maybe it's plays. But one of the things he mentioned is in this book. I think it's Gooseberries, because I think that's a play. So I looked at the book right away, like, oh, is one of those in here? And it is. So in November, I will read Gooseberries. I am at the point now where I am going to be reading my beloved Tolstoy. It's a short story called Master and Man, and I can't wait. I have so far read In the Cart by Anton Chekhov. Brilliant when you hear it broken down, like brilliant the way that Chekhov, like I had no idea there were like, well, I guess I did have a little bit of a framework that stories have ways of being written, but I don't know, just really, I didn't like very much the story called The Singers by Turgenev. And then there's another one, the very last story in here is Tolstoy's Aloysia the Pot. Yeah, this is such an excellent book to just pick up and put down, palate cleanser in between things. And I'm so glad that I just have it sitting there, because it reminded me, and also that James mentioned the reading that they're going to be doing in November, because it got me thinking about this book again. So check out James's video. I will link his channel below, and we'll try to link the actual video that I'm talking about, which might have been one of his most recent ones. Please come and tell me what you've been up to. I have, as I said, some travel plans coming this weekend. I'm going to the very large New York State Sheep and Wool Festival, because I've recently become a knitter, and I'm just going for the day on Saturday. It's in the town of Rhinebeck, New York. I'm really looking forward to going, and I got, because over the weekend this show can easily have 30 to 40,000 people in it. I did get a flu shot already. Normally I would end up getting it a little later when there's a flu shot clinic, but I got it about 5 days ago, and it made me sick for at least 3 days. So I'm just sharing that with you so you know it's a rough flu strain, I guess, that they're predicting, because it came in waves off and on. I thought I was feeling all right. I went out and took a run, and then it turns out it was too early to do that. So plan for that. I'm not the only one. I'm hearing that it's a little rough this year, but worth it. Please share with me what you're reading now that it's fall, and if you're into any of the themed reading that goes on in October and November. I'd love to hear about it. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the comments. And thanks for joining me. I hope to see you again. Bye.